to an official stance of RFK suspending his campaign, as you noted, and dropping out and endorsing Donald Trump. It was kind of a strange moment. I agree. When we were sitting in that room with RFK and he said he wasn't ending his campaign, he was just suspending it, but then went on to say that he was taking his name off the ballot and reversing some of the challenges that he had made, particularly in these battleground states. So unclear what exactly he meant by that. Not suspending, I mean, not ending his campaign, but just suspending it. But clearly he has something in his head there. And I will tell you, I was told that he is going to be on the campaign trail for Donald Trump and with Donald Trump in the coming weeks.
All right, Kristen Holmes, thanks very much. After Robert F. Kennedy Jr. endorsed Trump, 5 of his siblings issued this statement, which I'll read in its entirety, and I quote, "We want an America filled with hope and bound together by a shared vision of a brighter future, a future defined by individual freedom, economic promise, and national pride. We believe in Harris and Walz. Our brother Bobby's decision to endorse Trump today is a betrayal of the values that our father and family hold most dear. It is a sad ending to a sad story." That's from Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, Courtney Kennedy, Kerry Kennedy, Chris Kennedy, and Rory Kennedy. Joined now by another member of the Kennedy family, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s cousin, former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, son of the late Senator Ted Kennedy. Patrick, it's good to see you, Congressman. Thanks for being with us. I mean, what is it like to, I mean, on a personal level, seeing your cousin with the former president, and do you agree with the statement of his siblings that this is a betrayal of the values your family holds dear?
So I love Bobby a lot. We got to spend a lot of time this summer together. You know, we all live next to each other and on Cape Cod in the summertime. And my kids were playing over at his house, and we were on the beach together. So I think of him as a cousin. And this, case of him supporting President Trump, obviously there's nothing about Donald Trump that is anywhere close to reflecting the legacy of Robert Kennedy's father and my uncle, President Kennedy, my dad, anyone in my family. Our family believes in democracy. We believe in the fact that my uncles, one of whom laid down his life in World War II, fighting Hitler over Germany, got shot down. I mean, there were many veterans who were laid to rest in Arlington Cemetery who took on fascism. And as we know, in the oath to office, we have to protect our country and its constitution, both foreign and domestic. And I think we fought the foreign wars against fascism, but now, of course, we're waging a war, if you will, against fascism here at home, because this is a campaign by Donald Trump that wants to really terrorize people with the notion that government can easily come after them. This is so far afield from what we in the United States assume to be part of our very makeup. And you go to other parts of the world, we worry about government coming in and absconding you and arresting you in the middle of the night. Like the idea that we would have a government under Donald Trump that could threaten the very nature of what our democracy is all about is
do you talk to? I mean, you're talking about seeing your cousin. I mean, you believe he's joined a ticket which is promoting fascism and may lead to fascism in America. Do you talk to him about that? I mean, all families have difference of opinions, and we've all sat around dinner tables with relatives who think completely differently than we think. So everybody can relate to this. But is that something you talked about, or is it not worth engaging on?
To me, it's not worth engaging on. I did talk to him earlier in the campaign about not competing in those swing states where I felt that he could cost us the election. He chose not to do that. And at that point, my effort to try to keep him from jeopardizing, in that case, President Biden's reelection, was a non-starter. That said, I think we all are fighting each other in this country. It's one of the major problems that we have. And I don't want to have that all spill into my family.
Yeah.
He lives next door to us. As I said, my kids, we have a good time together when we're on the ocean. I really don't want to get into, bashing my cousin. I love him. I really do.
Yeah.
And so my feeling is, my big issue, as you know, Anderson, because you've had me on talking about is mental health and addiction. And, why I'm so pumped about Harris and Waltz is Harris, as part of the Biden-Harris, have done more for mental health than any other president in our history. Governor Waltz keynoted the Kennedy Forum last year. This is before he was obviously even in the thought of anybody of being a future vice president. He spent 5 hours with the whole mental health advocacy community, talking about mental health. We now know his personal passion, having watched all of us with great emotion as his son Gus embraced him. And Governor Waltz, soon to be Vice President Waltz, will carry our nation forward with mental health and addiction policies. We can count on that.
I do.
Go ahead.
I do want to. I just want to inform our viewers something that Jack Schlossberg, President Kennedy's grandson, posted online about this. He says, "Never been less surprised in my life. Been saying it for over a year. RFK Jr. is for sale. Works for Trump. Bedfellows and loving it. Kamala Harris is for the people. The easiest decision of all time. Just got easier." I don't know if you formally endorsed Harris Waltz.
I am a huge fan. I'm going on the road to campaign for the next president and vice president of the United States. As I said, I know Governor Waltz. I served with him in Congress. As I said, we've been friends over the years, and he spent 5 hours. We had a day-long event around how to improve our mental health and addiction system. 90% Americans screened for mental health within 10 years, 90% treated with evidence-based treatment, 90% supported in recovery. We wouldn't expect any less if it were any other illness, and yet we settle for less than 20% of Americans getting any of that today in this country.
Yeah, so much more needs to be done. Former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Perspective now from David Axelrod, a former senior advisor to President Obama, Ashley Etienne, a former communications director to Vice President Harris, and Scott Jennings, former special assistant to President George W. Bush. David, does it make sense to you that he says he's not ending his campaign, he's just suspending it, and he's going to be on the ballots in some states, but not in battleground states because he doesn't want to hurt Donald Trump in those states?
Well, first, Anderson, let me say I watched some of his press conference today, and there were a lot of things he said that didn't necessarily make a lot of sense to me. But from what I divined, what he was saying is he will continue to compete in states where he doesn't think he'll have an impact on the outcome of the race. So he'll compete in blue states and red states, but he won't compete in battleground states.
I mean, to me, that just seems like a vanity thing. Like, he wants to stay in the game, and he wants to have supporters out on the streets waving his name around. It just seems kind of pathetic.
I mean, I don't think it's a great leap to suggest that it might be a vanity thing. I think this whole exercise has been a vanity thing. The thing that's concerning, it should be concerning, but it does give you a clue as to what impact he might have, is the fact that the Trump campaign, he said at the press conference, Don Jr. and others have been soliciting him, and and he's had a series of conversations. We'll let J.D. Vance confirm that. They believe that his going out of the race in these battleground states can yield the presidency to Donald Trump. And I think we had this discussion the other night with John King. I think that it may be a point that, that is gained in these states for Trump, but these states may be decided by a point or less than a point. So the fact that apparently he's talked about taking a position in the administration, something that Harris wouldn't do, the whole thing kind of stinks in a way.
Scott, I mean, you're not with the Trump campaign, but how concerned, or what do you think about this? And will it help in some of those swing states? Is this a deciding factor, you think? I mean, is this going to?
Well, great question. I think. By the way, it was wonderful to be with you both in Chicago all week. We had a great convention together. I think that there are votes to be had here. Yeah, thanks. I think there are votes to be had here. That's why Trump's doing it. I look at some of the polling, and the Trump campaign has some analysis of the polling. They think most of the people who are still with RFK are going to come towards Trump if they vote. So obviously the transaction is I gotta get some votes. That's number one. However, what you can't know, but what I think is probable, is the other side of the algebra, which is getting in bed with a Looney Tunes may have consequences. I mean, there may be people out there who know RFK Jr.'s history of being a complete liberal provocateur before he became a conservative provocateur and say, well, I'm not sure I want to be in bed with this at all. So I see the impulse to do it. I understand the polling equation. He's got some votes. You want to try to capture them. But there may be a cost to it because obviously he says and does things, that are kind of weird. And he has done that for a very long time. And I would just caution the Trump folks: don't get so deep in bed you can't get out of it, because take you down rabbit holes you don't want to go.
Yeah, actually, again, I just find it remarkable that he's still gonna, he still wants his name on the ballot in a bunch of states, not in the ones where it's gonna hurt Trump. He still wants, I mean, I drove by a group of RFK Jr. supporters last night leaving the convention at 1 a.m. They had like a van, they were playing music and had waving around flags. Like, I guess he likes that there's people out there who are actually dedicating days of their lives to waving his name around, but it just seems to what effect at this point, other than supporting Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I've always thought that this was a vanity project, but also I thought he was in the race to not just disrupt the race, but to disrupt it in a way that supports his own interests. I mean, now he's been shopping himself around to both campaigns trying to get a cabinet position. But I think Scott is absolutely right. This creates an opportunity for Democrats to further define Republicans as extreme, as conspiracy theorists, or as Governor Walz says, just plain weird. I mean, you have someone who says that he believes that there's chemicals in our water that's making kids transgender, that he thinks broadband is causing cancer. This is kind of the Democrats, like, best. It's like a wish list. It's like a dream for Democrats. It's like continue down this path of defining the new Republican Party, the MAGA Party, as extremists and conspiracy theorists that are just out of step and out of line with the American people. So this, I think, to some degree, plays to Harris in her favor if she could take advantage of it. But also, the polls show that there's a sizable number of Kennedy supporters that are independents and never Trumpers who she could still play for. And the campaign put out a statement today saying that they're gonna make overtures to those voters.
David, do you think that there are RFK Jr. voters that that Harris could get?
I think she's gotten most of them. If you see, after she entered the race, his vote really deflated, and a lot of those votes were Democrats who were parking themselves over with RFK, and they came back to the Democratic Party when there was a switch at the top of the ticket. There may be some that she can get, but again, I don't think that Trump would have made a deal with Bobby Kennedy if he thought that it wasn't going to help him. Anderson, I just have to say one thing. My political hero in one of the formative heroes in my life was Bobby Kennedy, his father, who was a guy who was incredibly thoughtful at the end of his career about justice and economic justice and civil rights, and really was a global leader for human rights. And as his family said, it's just antithetical to everything that he stood for. It's sad to me. I mean, I listened to that press conference today, and he's not a well man. I mean, I'm not a professional. I can't make that judgment. And after listening to Patrick Kennedy, who's a champion of mental health, I don't want to use that term lightly, but you can't listen to him and say that, everything's okay. And the fact that he was out on display by Donald Trump tonight, I agree with Ashley. It reflects something about that campaign, but at the end of the day, it's still, I think, he's there because they think he's going to help them win.
Do you think it was a mistake? I mean, there were reports that the Harris campaign, wouldn't even really talk to him, that he made outreach to both Trump and to Harris. Was that a mistake for the Harris campaign to not, entertain something with him?
Absolutely not. There was more downside than there was upside to her talking to him. I mean, none of their they're not aligned in terms of their vision for the nation, in terms of policy, in terms of the challenge facing the American people today. I mean, I saw today where he tries to co-opt a lot of her messaging on freedom and supporting the middle class, but the reality is that's not where his policies are. That's not where Donald Trump's policies are. So I didn't see any upside for her to have that conversation. It just would have done more damage than good.
Scott,